Mohini, welcome to the show. Great to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So, what is the current state of mental health in the US?
We have a lot to celebrate. First and foremost, I think people's understanding of mental health issues, they are issues that we all face. They exist in all families and all communities, but also that there are treatments that work. We saw particularly around the COVID pandemic, so much more awareness of mental health concerns and how that impacts everyone's daily living. So, a lot to celebrate there and enhanced awareness of these issues and how they impact all of us. There's also incredible advancements happening in research and in treatment. So, again, that part about the treatment is possible, that it's helpful. Those options are becoming so much more clear. There's much better medications that are available for people with mental health issues. And we do have some challenges still. People struggle with access to care. So even if they know they need the help, they're not sure where to begin or how to tell whether a provider is who they might need, and they might not have availability right away. So we have some challenges there too in mental well-being to really help take care of people that are saying that they need help.
Hmm. And you are working with the National Council. Can you tell us a little bit more about what they do and how they have been part of this change?
Yeah, so I've worked with the National Council a long time. It's actually been close to 20 years now. And the National Council is a national nonprofit organization. We are an association. We represent clinics around the country. And our real focus is to ensure that mental well being, including recovery from substance use, is a reality for everyone in the country. And we really effectuate against that mission in partnership of the National Council. And again, these are these clinics that are serving people in community. They're all over the country and every state, providing mental health, substance use care, but also other things that people need. For example, physical health services. Either they do that themselves or they're doing it in partnership with others, or they might need help with housing or education or employment, connections to family. And these are all things that our members focus on. So, really, our job at National Council is to elevate their voice and pursue policy change and training and education in the country that really advance the quality and effectiveness of care.
That's really interesting because mental health is not limited just to your mind or your brain, as some people might think. It affects all aspects of your life. So you have to take a really holistic lens on how someone's mental health is affecting their ability to live and navigate the world.
Well, right. And this even gets back to your first question that, for so long, for decades and decades, really in every country around the world, there needed to be advancement in thinking about mental health, that your body is connected to your mind. And some countries have made that advancement faster than others. And I would really only say that it's in the last 20 years or so that in this country, that really policy wise and practice wise, we are realigning things so that somebody is being recognized as being a whole person, that their brain health, their mental health is impacting their body and vice versa. And also their ability to connect with others and to hold jobs and to complete schooling and to be present for the people in their lives that matter, that mental health is so important and central to all of that.
Mm. And what are some of the forces or what's contributing to all of these mental health concerns that we see out there in the US?
Gosh, well, if I were to reflect back on the last 6, 7 years, we must start the conversation with loneliness. The pandemic had such an extreme impact on every person around the globe in a lot of different ways. But at bare minimum, it was an incredibly isolating experience and revealed the impact loneliness has had really for eons, but showed itself most extremely and most recently during the pandemic with these ways in which we're sort of forced to isolate. Even at the National Council, we moved to fully remote work. And, we can see how in that environment, even coworkers can feel really isolated from each other. The kind of loneliness, really can impact our hopefulness about a day and just the gut check we can have in community with others to know if we're doing okay or not. Another huge factor that impacts mental well-being is substance use. That's often used as coping mechanism for challenges that people might be experiencing in life and becomes an addiction that needs treatment. I think that's another huge impact. Of course, with young people, something that's talked about so much is social media, whether it's bullying or, generated or otherwise content that is not constructive to young people's self-esteem or understanding connection to others. There's a lot of difficulty that young people are experiencing there. And, in totality, I would say, hopefulness about the future is another real impact on mental well-being, whether it's the economy might be struggling right now, or that there's a lot of job challenges in the country, or people's ability to have geographic mobility. These things really influence mental well-being. Like if you don't feel like you have hope about your future, it's hard to stay positive, and stay balanced in your life.
And often there's an interplay between all of those factors. I feel lonely, so I'll scroll on my phone
That's
and
right.
then I'm not sleeping very well. And now I'm isolated from my friends and it's just this compound effect.
Right.
And then people end up potentially homeless or they can't find work. And so all of these issues compound. And then of course, to relieve the suffering, you rely on a substance. And suddenly that's a downward spiral. So it's multifactorial for sure.
Yeah, that's right.
So what about the workplace? Because we often think, okay, just get someone a job and everything will be fine. But not every workplace is the same. And what is the impact of work on people's mental health?
Right. We all want to be positive contributors to society. And I certainly hope for everyone that they have a job that they find fulfilling and however they define fulfilling for themselves. For some people, that's about a paycheck to help open the doors in their personal lives for things they want to do. Other people seek employment for other reasons, for defining their identity, for expanding possibility of impact they want to have in the world. So whatever it is for that person, that makes the most sense is what's most important. And what we see is that work environments can be places of stress and burnout, in that, more and more people want to feel like their whole identity is recognized at work. And I think employers continue to grapple with how they can really meet their employee base where they are in that. But, one of the also the cool advancements that I have seen in recent years are employers having proactive programs focused on mental well-being. The National Council has a program called Mental Health First Aid, and we specifically work with employers in that program to really open doors to conversation that's appropriate in the workplace about mental health conditions and what do you do if you experience a coworker that might be struggling with their mental health. With so many employers working at least partially remotely, that kind of connection and awareness is very important. So I love seeing that those conversations are happening in the work environment. That helps employees feel like they are being seen as whole people, that they can acknowledge that might be having a rough week or that they're experiencing grief because of a loss of a loved one, or joy because maybe they just had a kid and that was a life goal that they had for themselves. So I've seen really great ways in which the mental well-being conversation is entering the workplace, in constructively, and that employers are experiencing their employee base being more engaged because of it.
And it's not just down to the employee to figure out, okay, here's some skills that I should use to be mentally well. It's both sides, right? It's the leader has to create an environment where people feel safe, and the organization needs to have that systemic type of support. If someone is not doing so well, and it has to be authentic. It can't just be, we've got an EAP, so we're doing all the right things. There are many factors in the workplace as well.
Oh, that's right. And you're touching on one of my really passion areas around leadership and the role that leaders really play in organizations to create a productive and effective and well workplace for their employees. I really think leaders they have, the choice to be an active participant in their staff's mental well-being and have an equally critical choice to make to not be of detriment to their staff's mental well-being. I know that in day-to-day reality, sometimes the lines aren't as clear because as a leader, you're balancing the needs of an organization and the needs of the individual. But in totality, I totally agree with you. An individual employee cannot drive their mental well-being by themselves. They have a big responsibility in it. However, your mental well-being as an individual is really impacted by those around you and the people you interact with. You think about the number of hours we work. the number of hours we interact with our coworkers, of course you're impacted by the people around you. Of course you're impacted by your leader. So very much so, the individual leader is critical in this conversation and the overall approach. And I would describe it as an approach of an organization because that really reaches beyond what you described as, transactionally an EAP of being available. That is a very important resource
Hmm.
that can be a safe place for folks, but that there's so much more to an organization creating an environment that supports mental well-being. Like, is it on your agendas when you do all staff events? Are you training up your leadership staff to know what to do when somebody they might be interacting with at the meeting is showing signs of having some trouble? Are you reaching out to employees, recognizing them as people, whether it's about their birthday or accomplishment that they achieved, really treating relationships more than just transactional. And again, like seeing an employee as a whole person.
Do you think there's changes generationally where boomers went to work and it was all command and conquer and get things done and deliver or else? And they've struggled somewhat to adjust to, well, this modern world and the expectations of younger employees. I know when I work with Gen Z, they want balance. They're pretty clear about that. They want a workplace that engages them and that feels purposeful. And millennials are kind of squashed in the middle there, kind of becoming the leaders, trying to manage Gen Z, trying to manage the demands coming from up above. There's a lot going on for someone who's potentially in their 30s or 40s at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I hesitate to over therapize big groups of people. There's a lot of research that shows what you say is true. There are generational differences and expectations that people have of an employer, and also how employers can really engage for most productivity and most engagement of an employee base. What we see most in the younger generations that are now coming into the workforce is that they do seek deeper alignment, perhaps, with identity connection between themselves and their employer. I think that can be a really powerful tool for an employer to capitalize on. And there is a responsibility for the employer to then meet them where they are and provide that home base for people as they define themselves early on in their careers.
Mm. Here's a big one. With people needing to navigate AI and the changes that are happening in the workforce, do you think a different set of skills will be needed both for leaders and for employees as we progress? Or do you think it's still those human qualities that matter in a world where you may be working alongside agents and robots and a very, very different workplace?
I absolutely think work in every way is already beginning to look different and will look completely different than anything we can even imagine right now. In the near future, this isn't some magical, like, sort of Jetsons thing for hundreds of years from now. This is, here and now shifts that are occurring. And I do think will require a completely different skill set and redefining of as an individual, how do we see ourselves as productive contributors to a job, to an organization, to an impact you want to have in the world? I'm still very much in learning mode about this. And I've really begun to inquire, how do I think of AI as a partner, not solely as a productivity tool, but to completely redo, reimagine what it is that I contribute to the organization as a human. I do fundamentally believe humans play an important role in organizations in an AI enabled future. However, I think how I, as an individual, define I've been productive today or I was productive this week is going to look really different than how I would say that today. And that requires us all to do a lot of reading up and mindset shift. And it's fundamentally different than how we were trained in our schooling.
It really is. And if task allocation, or I really don't like calling people resources, but like that resource management side of things is automated by AI, which will be way more efficient,
That's right.
it leaves the question, what does a manager actually do? And I suspect they become more like coaches or
So
mentors within the organization. And that's where mental health, first aid, and programs like that come in because you equip these people with human skills to ensure that everyone's all right. I kind of see that as a potential future where managers become coaches, humans focus on human tasks. One of the mistakes I've seen out there is only employing people who have AI skills Whereas you may need two types of people. You've got those who prompt and create agents and build the AI to do whatever you need it to do. And you still need the people. I mean, you saw with Salesforce, they got rid of 4,000 jobs. And then there's all this friction and low psychological safety. And I suspect it's because they hired people who were good with technology and not who were good with people.
Well, to some degree, this really resonates with the challenges that are experienced even in traditional workforce planning that employers do. You know, employers can treat workforce planning very transactionally, literally one for one here and now, where an employee is in their performance and match them very transactionally to a set of tasks. Another way to think about workforce planning is what is the development potential of this person? And also, what are the needs of the organization? How are they evolving over time versus here and now? And really trying to match that together. And it's more just, I think, about learning how to take that mindset of more evolved workforce planning and integrate AI into that. It's quite the mind warp right now. And
Yeah.
imagining that, but I think the AI skills are so critical, and yet it will remain true. You're right that people still need coaching from people. People still need development from other people. And my hope is that AI allows leaders and managers of people to operate more at what I think of as the top of their license, essentially, the top of their skill level, that they don't have to focus so much, spending as much time on things like expense approvals and timesheet approvals, and can focus more on the people development of the staff that work for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you hear about, for example, physician burnout, and you've got doctors who are just overwhelmed with the amount of admin that they have to do and the compliance requirements, it's in those environments that I see having your AI assistant record the transcript of the interaction, log everything, manage the prescription. They can become healers again and actually focus on people and help them through challenging situations. So, in those situations, it can really augment us. It's a superpower.
Absolutely. And we're seeing it in other ways as well amongst our member organizations. There's many mental health professionals that work in our member organizations and who are already seeing the benefit of AI being embedded in their electronic health record or in other tools that are enabled by AI to help improve quality of care. That's the part that's getting really cool. Again, you can think of AI helping with productivity, which will be huge anyway, helping with scheduling or reducing administrative burden. And also seeing how AI can help a clinician notice patterns that are occurring across their notes across multiple patients. And are those patterns okay or not? Are they maybe needing to shake things up a little bit and really think about the need of a particular patient? Or AI helping a clinician think through the treatment plan, so forward looking based on what the presenting symptoms are for a patient in that day. I mean, these are the really cool advancements also that will impact the quality of care that an individual is experiencing.
Yeah. And in education, the opportunities are limitless. And of course, we don't want to end up in a world where kids are just plugged into a device all day. But perhaps the classroom becomes a social space, and then people have some kind of avatar that provides them with precision learning where they are. And then you return back to the group and tell stories and have fun and play in the playground. It could really help teachers as well. Like there's no limit to the application, right?
Well, and another great example that we're seeing and are really excited about are AI simulations that are preparing new clinicians. So, oftentimes, what we experience is people are graduating out of programs and they're really not ready for the real world. They have the book skills, the book knowledge, but that application of that in a room is something that's a stretch assignment for them at first. And so we're now starting to see AI simulations as a means to take those folks who are just graduating out of school, getting a job, and the burden isn't entirely on a supervisor to put them through all these case examples. They can have that balanced with these AI simulations that help prepare them for likely experiences they're going to have with patients that come in the door so they can practice when they want to. And again, it's like less burnout for the supervisor to have to be the only one carrying that training burden.
Yeah. So, for many of our viewers who are leaders, if they've never really thought about mental health, and most will have by this point in time in 2026 when we're conversing, but if they haven't really thought about it and they feel a bit strange about how do I talk to someone about their feelings, what would you suggest?
Yeah. So, first of all, I think everyone, wherever you are in your career, you are a leader. I think that there's opportunity to behave like a leader at every stage of your career. I even think of it in other domains of my life. And how can I be a leader to my friends, to my family? And that does originate often for me in checking in with people on how their mental health is. I know that everybody's just grappling with so much all the time. And I've had moments where I wish somebody just asked me how I was doing today. And I think that can be a great place to start. One of the critical things that mental health first aid teaches us, and the evidence shows this across programs really is that, asking somebody about their mental health, or in more extreme example, if you're concerned somebody has, urge to harm themselves, we have a fear that saying that, putting that in the room might give them the idea. But all of the research shows that if somebody is thinking about it, you're not giving them that idea. Like if they're thinking it, they're already thinking it. And you opening the door for the conversation can be what transforms what their future holds. And so,
Mm.
starting off, I think if it's something that's really intimidating, coming with authentic voice and asking somebody, how are you really doing today? Like, how are things going? And digging deeper if they're staying really surface, asking in more detail, like, how are things going on at home? How are things with your friends? I heard you went on vacation recently. How was that? And hearing more of their voice and their nonverbals as well. That active listening is a key facet of the mental health first aid program, but also just in general, authentically connecting with people about their mental well being, regardless of the setting you're doing it in.
So just being a human and going
Yeah,
up to
yeah.
someone and just stopping.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I took the mental health first aid training good 15 years ago now. And one of the really striking things that impacted me about it was that very piece you're naming, just going up to somebody. We all see on the street, or if you're in a library, in a grocery store, wherever you are, or at a party, or wherever, you'll see somebody that's sort of alone and by themselves or in their thoughts. And it isn't all of our natural inclination to go up to them and ask them, how are you doing? Are you okay? And really, mental health first aid teaches you to do that and to also know that that's okay and that that is a significant helper when you do so. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't need to be a clinician to be of help. The simple act of listening. And, depending on the environment you're in, Google searching really quick where there are more professional resources in your geographic area. It's a great place to start.
Is it true that many people who work in the mental health field are burning out themselves?
Yes, and I think this resonates across the healthcare and social sector. There's a lot of burnout going on, and that is very much true for the mental health and substance use community. If I were to think about what might be the reasons behind this, I think that there are quite a few. One of which is the sort of paperwork and admin burden that mental health professionals experience. When I talk to my friends who are in this field, they talk about the reasons for why they got into it. It's largely because they wanted to help people, or it might be that they've had a family member growing up that struggles with these issues and they wanted to contribute to a different story for others. Never is it about, I wanted to complete paperwork and document and be compliant. And that ends up being a big part of people's day. And that really contributes a lot to the burnout. There's other factors as well. Certainly, pay is a big contributor. Lack of continuing education and professional development. Also, lack of understanding of what the career path is for further recognition or growth in different ways, whether that's growth in brain space and learning, or growth in sphere of influence, or growth in money. That so much more could be done to recognize these individuals. It reminds me a lot. My mom was a social worker when I was growing up, and she worked in the public school systems, and she worked with children with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And so I was exposed to teachers a lot and the mental health community a lot. And there's a lot of parallels there about these people really being, they wear their heart on their sleeve. They really are heroes in what they do every day and the responsibility they carry in taking care of others and being a contributor to a person's life journey. They're not really recognized as such. It's one thing to call somebody a hero, but they really need to be paid like heroes, and the organizations that employ them should be paid like heroes as well. And that isn't the story right now in this country.
So there's about 4.5 million people who've been certified as
That's right.
mental health first aiders, right?
Right.
So what does that certification look like? What does it enable you to do?
Yeah. So mental health first aid teaches people the signs and symptoms of mental health and substance use conditions. And what do you do when you come upon somebody that needs help? And, these are things that aren't, when it's all pieced together, it sort of tells a story that's often very relatable for people. Very quickly in trainings around the country, instructors will share with us how people just share so many stories about a person that they knew growing up or a person that they are connected to now who are struggling with his issues, and they've just never known what to do about it. They haven't known how they could help. And so this training is really intended to unlock that bottleneck that's playing out to really change the micro conversations that are happening. This is not about formal treatment. We don't expect mental health first aiders to provide formal treatment in any way, but it is about changing that public discourse, one conversation at a time, about mental health and substance use issues, and when more professional help is needed, to provide people with those resources about what that connection can be to the professional treatment community. We think of those 4.5 million as part of a movement, and we want many, many millions more to be trained in it. Mental health first aid is an international program that was started in Australia. It's evidence based. And we learned so much from talking with other countries about what works. It really, when it comes down to it, it is about training anybody. They can be a professional or not. They could be a school teacher. They could be a bus driver. They could be working anywhere, truly. This could be what their main focus is. They could be a family member and not be working otherwise, but really helping to open the door to deeper understanding about these issues and how do you help somebody who needs help.
So it's like CPR training, except for your mental health.
That's right. That's right. And it's a very inspiring parallel for us. There are so many people that are trained in CPR in this country, and it's a similar thing. It's like, you don't see mental health crises in the same way as you might somebody who's having a heart attack or fainting because of low sugar, but that level of worry is the same, and also the level of help can be the same that one provides in CPR, but you can do that through being trained in mental health first aid.
And there's no prerequisites. Anyone can learn these skills.
Anyone can learn it. Anyone can learn it. And we actually have even a specialized program called Teen Mental Health First Aid that is teaching teenagers what to do to recognize the signs and symptoms of mental health and substance use issues in fellow teenagers and what they can do to help them. And of course, again, it's all age appropriate. It's not expecting anybody to be a professional or to have any background knowledge at all. Our intention is to really make this as approachable as possible for any public audience.
And for teenagers, any tips for them to improve their overall mental well-being? Because obviously we talk about social media a lot being part of the problem. Do you think it is as much of a problem, or this is still to be seen? I mean, it's quite hard to draw conclusions, although a lot of the evidence does point towards less social media equals better mental well-being.
Right. I mean, there's the two facets to it, right, that come off the top of my head. There's one literal use of technology and our brains and staring at a screen and how impactful that is for teenagers while their brains are still forming. But there's also the second aspect of it that's about the content that they're then absorbing. And really, what are they being exposed to, and how much of that are positive influences, and how much of it is not constructive? That it is either impacting their self esteem, or they're thinking about their identity, or what is viewed as socially appropriate in interaction with others. Adjacent to that, too, I suppose, is the anonymity that exists online, and sort of what is acculturated and what people can say to each other, and teenagers getting used to it. There's a lot of real big concerns, and parental controls help with that to some degree, but we know that it doesn't help enough. As you say, the research indicates, that social media access is really worrisome. So I think that's critical. But the other piece too, I would say, is young people taking their mental fitness as just as important as their physical fitness. I think training up those skills in a different way. My childhood and upbringing, that wasn't something we focused on. That wasn't talked about in school the same way. And we had physical education classes. There was no talk about mental health in that. And that wasn't something that existed in my family home. But building up these resiliency skills at a young age and getting more in the habit of talking about mental well being at a young age can be very transformative. And we see that already, even in this younger generation. They talk about mental health issues so much more openly,
Mhm.
even than 20 years ago. And it's not as much of a drama, and people can get support from each other in a really different way than before. It's really exciting. It gives me a lot of hope about the future.
I love Gen Z. I love when you ask someone who's younger, and I don't give these blanket labels a lot of the time, but younger people, if you say, "How are you?" And often in the interactions I have, they will really tell you and they'll label the emotions with granularity and go into detail about why. You are so much more self aware than I was at
Yes,
your age. I remember just being told, like, well, mental fitness, if you like, where I grew up in South Africa was being slightly afraid of the teachers and and quiet, and then you're good.
that's right. I mean, I grew up in very much a sort of disciplined mindset, and that a lot of these sort of challenges that I might have been having about my self-esteem or my identity, or if I was getting bullied, there wasn't a place for me to talk about it so openly and to recognize that I could have used help from others at that time. It wasn't just about me. And so I love the versions of the conversations that are happening now. It's so different.
Yeah. And what about the war on drugs? Net positive, net negative, and I suspect I know the answer.
Again, there's a lot of hope here in a particular way. So we have seen, a lot of recognition about what's called in the US the opioid epidemic, and a lot
Yeah.
of resources that were put towards trying to address that. And so we have seen reductions in the deaths from opioid overdoses in the last couple of years. Like excellent, excellent news. Now, underneath that headline, though, there are some challenges that remain that really there are still a lot of people inappropriately using opioids, a lot of people continuing to use illicit drugs, a lot of people continuing to use alcohol. And we just
Mm.
haven't been able to move the needle on these things as much as we'd hope, as much as the research shows, as much as therapy shows, as much as medication shows as possibility. There's still so much more work to be done to try to address that. So that, for me, where I go to is, well, then you got to go progressively upstream to address this. What is the education clinicians are being provided about medication prescribing? And that has been a huge amount of work that's been done, but still more work needs to be done about prescribing opioid medications. But you have to keep going more and more upstream to understand what really are the dynamics here. And there are, of course, still so many challenges around street drugs and the safety of it. One of the big things that was really being discussed the last few years, and we've seen the impact in opioid deaths, is that a lot of medications that are being sold on the streets are laced with fentanyl, and
Yeah.
people are dying because of that. It is so powerful, and it's happening even at a really young age. Just last week, I unfortunately heard about somebody whose kid, consumed something at a party that was laced with fentanyl. That kid was 13 years old and almost died because of it. And this story is heartbreaking and on repeat around the country. So we still have a ton of work to do to get it off of get it out of the market, but also continue to educate people up the stream of access to these drugs and medications that like really we have to reduce the supply, as well as ensuring people are getting into good treatment for their addiction.
It's a really complex one. And then there are novel approaches emerging. I mean, we just recently saw on the news here in New Zealand that psychedelic therapies are perhaps being approved.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, there's some really exciting advancements to that. The National Council recently had our annual conference, and we had this as a topic on the agenda to really talk about this because there are really novel, but starting to show research base that these medications as an option can be very helpful for people that are in recovery, might relapse, and need help. And so we're really excited about this advancement, and we really believe that it should be available as a treatment option for people.
So after 20 years in this field, do you remain optimistic about the future and why?
I do. I'm a really hopeful person. It sort of makes me wake up every morning, and I do have genuine belief and hope in our future. When I talk with mental health professionals, yes, there are the hardships in what they do, but there's also the amazing stories of the contributions they're making of impact. I get also incredibly hopeful when I talk with strangers who have nothing to do with the mental health space and they are engaging in conversations about mental health issues, about substance use issues in a different way. It gets me really, really excited. And I really believe in the innovative mindset of the professionals that work in this space. I think that they are incredibly creative, that they have solved for a lot of things with limited resources for decades, and will continue to do that moving forward. And I have a lot of hope there. It's not to say there aren't challenges in front of us. There are big policy changes ahead in the US that will really impact access to care. But I do have a fundamental belief in the people that work in this field to, figure out how to make it work.
And thanks to organizations like yours, where you play an integral role as chief of staff, really helping others to build awareness and to actually build those practical skills so that they can go out there and be, for example, mental health first aiders.
That's great. So true. And, shout out to the 4.5 million mental health first aiders in the US and the many, many more millions that are around the world.
Yeah, yeah. So if people are interested in connecting, following your work, finding out more about the National Council, where should they go?
Yeah, definitely start with our website, www.thenationalcouncil.org. And when you scroll to the bottom, you'll see all of our social media as well. Would love to see you on Instagram, Facebook, X, all the places.
Excellent. Mohini, thanks so much. It's been a pleasure. If you had one last thought for our audience who stuck with us to the end, what might it be?
Oh, thank you for listening in. Absolutely. And just get to know and have another conversation with somebody in your life. Ask them how they're doing and, see if somebody could just use a listening ear.
Thank you so much. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you.